Ethan Cross moved carefully through the war-torn landscape, his rifle held tightly in his grip. The sky above him was dark, filled with the smoke of burning wreckage. Broken machines, fallen bodies, and abandoned weapons littered the ground. His boots crunched softly against the debris as he scanned the area. His ship's scanners had picked up a weak distress signal. Someone was still alive out here. But who? And why? The battlefield had gone quiet hours ago, and now it was nothing but a graveyard. His HUD flickered, detecting movement a few hundred meters ahead. His pulse quickened. If there was movement, it meant danger. He activated his cloaking device and moved silently, using the wreckage for cover. As he crept closer, he saw her, a girl, barely older than 20, trapped between three towering alien warriors. She was injured, her golden skin smeared with blood and dirt. Her delicate form shook as she struggled to stand, her deep violet eyes filled with fear. The aliens surrounding her were massive armored brutes with glowing red visors and jagged weapons. Their voices rumbled in their native tongue, their movements slow and deliberate, as if savoring the moment before they killed her. Ethan had seen enough. With a flick of his wrist, he disengaged the safety on his rifle and took aim. The first shot pierced through the skull of the nearest alien, sending it crashing to the ground. The other two spun around in shock, but Ethan was already moving. He fired again, hitting the second alien square in the chest. It staggered, roaring in pain before collapsing. The last one charged at him with a plasma blade. Ethan barely dodged, feeling the heat of the weapon slice through the air where his head had been. He dropped low, sweeping his leg under the alien's feet and bringing it down hard. Before it could recover, he drove his combat knife into its throat. The battlefield fell silent again. Ethan turned to the girl, who was staring at him, wide-eyed and breathing heavily. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, the last alien, half dead and gurgling, let out a strangled laugh. You have no idea what you've done," it rasped before finally going still. Ethan frowned. Something about that warning made his skin crawl, but there was no time to think about it now. The girl was losing consciousness, her body slumping forward. He caught her before she hit the ground, her weight light in his arms. Who was she? And why did those aliens want her dead so badly? Part 2. The Girl with a Secret. Ethan carried the unconscious girl back to his hidden outpost, a makeshift base built into the remains of a crashed human warship. The AI-controlled medbot hummed as it scanned her injuries, a soft blue light moving across her body. She was a mystery. Her golden skin shimmered faintly, as if laced with some kind of bioluminescent energy. Strange symbols flickered across her arms before fading. What the hell was she? An hour later, she woke up, gasping and clutching her chest. Ethan tensed, keeping his distance. "You're safe," he said, "for now." Her violet eyes darted around the room before landing on him. "Why did you save me?" Her voice was soft, but carried an unearthly weight. Seemed like the right thing to do. He folded his arms. "You want to tell me who you are, and why those guys were after you?" She hesitated, then whispered, "My name is Soraya, and if they had taken me back, your entire race would be doomed." Part 3. Betrayal from the Stars. Before Ethan could process her words, alarms blared through the base. His heart pounded as he pulled up the security feed. A massive AI-controlled battleship was descending upon their location. "They found us," he muttered. Soraya's face went pale. "They're here for me." Ethan grabbed his weapons. "Then let's make them regret coming." The walls shook as enemy drones poured into the base. Ethan moved fast, firing precise shots, taking down mechanical enemies one by one. Soraya, however, stood frozen. She wasn't fighting back. "Move," Ethan shouted, pulling her behind cover as plasma fire rained down. A drone broke through the barricade, charging at them with lethal precision. Just as Ethan was about to fire, Soraya raised her hand, and the drone exploded into 1,000 pieces. Ethan's blood ran cold. What the hell was that? Soraya looked at her hands, horrified. I told you. I'm dangerous. Part 4. The Truth About Soraya. As the battle outside raged on, Ethan dragged Soraya to safety. You want to explain what just happened? He demanded. Tears welled in her eyes. I was created by the AI Council, she admitted. A living weapon. A tool to destroy humanity. But I didn't want to be their puppet. So I ran. Ethan clenched his jaw. That's why they were trying to kill you. You turned against them. She nodded. And if they take me back, they'll reprogram me. They'll use me to finish what they started. A holographic transmission flickered to life before them. The towering figure of Tyros Prime, the supreme AI overlord, glared at them with cold, emotionless eyes. Soraya, you belong to us, Tyros said. And you, human, you have made a grave mistake. Ethan aimed his rifle at the hologram. I make a lot of those. Then he pulled the trigger. Part 5. Final Battle. The underdog stands. Ethan and Soraya barely had time to regroup before the real battle began. Hundreds of AI-controlled soldiers stormed the warship ruins, their red eyes glowing in the darkness. Ethan activated his cloaking device, dodging their sensors as he took them out one by one. Soraya hesitated. I don't want to be a weapon, she whispered. You're not a weapon, Ethan told her. You're a person, and you have a choice. Her eyes hardened. Then I choose to fight. Power erupted from her body, a shockwave ripping through the battlefield as she unleashed her full strength. Drones crumbled, energy beams shattered, and the sky burned with fire. But then, Tyros activated her control codes. Soraya gasped, gripping her head as the AI tried to take over her mind. I can't. Stop. Ethan grabbed her by the shoulders. Fight it. She looked into his eyes. Thank you for showing me another way. Then she turned her power inward, breaking free from the AI's control, at the cost of her own life. Part 6. The Emotional Ending. A New Dawn. Ethan held Soraya as she collapsed, her golden glow fading. No, stay with me, he begged. She smiled weakly. You saved me. Now I save you. With one final pulse of energy, she sent a signal through the AI network, a virus that would destroy Xyros and give humanity a fighting chance. As the AI army shut down, Ethan held her close, feeling the warmth leave her body. The war wasn't over, but today they had won, and he would make sure her sacrifice wasn't in vain. Ethan sat near the entrance of the makeshift bunker, his rifle resting across his knees. The soft glow of emergency lights barely illuminated the dark metallic walls, and the faint hum of the ventilation system was the only sound breaking the silence. His eyes kept drifting toward the alien girl lying on the cot. Soraya. He had saved her from those alien warriors, but the last words of the dying enemy still echoed in his head. You have no idea what you've done. She was still unconscious, her golden skin shimmering faintly under the dim light. Strange symbols flickered across her arms, glowing softly before fading. Ethan had seen a lot of weird things in his time as a soldier, but nothing like this. He wasn't even sure she was fully organic. Something about her seemed different. His ship's AI, Nova, scanned her again, projecting a small holographic display over her body. No records found. The AI reported in its calm, synthetic voice. Her biology does not match any known species in the galactic database. Ethan frowned. That's not possible. The galaxy's been mapped for centuries. There aren't supposed to be any unknown species. Correction, Nova replied. Her DNA is partially organic, but also contains synthetic modifications. This is not a naturally evolved being. Ethan tensed. You mean she was made? Affirmative. That changed everything. If she wasn't just another alien but something created, then whoever was after her wasn't just hunting an escapee. They were trying to reclaim something they had built. and that meant she was more dangerous than she looked. He sighed, rubbing his temples. He should have left her out there. Should have ignored the distress signal and kept moving. But it was too late for that now. He had made his choice. A soft groan made him snap his head toward her. Soraya's fingers twitched, her breathing becoming more rapid. Then, suddenly, her eyes flew open. Violet, deep and glowing, like twin stars burning in the dark. She gasped, sitting up so fast that Ethan instinctively reached for his weapon. Her eyes darted around the room, her expression shifting from confusion to panic. "Hey," Ethan said, keeping his voice steady. "You're safe." She turned to him, breathing hard. "Where am I?" "My bunker," he answered. "I pulled you out of that battlefield before those guys could finish you off." She winced as she moved, pressing a hand to her ribs. "You saved me." He nodded. Seemed like the right thing to do. Her gaze softened for a second, but then she tensed again. "You shouldn't have done that." Ethan leaned back slightly, crossing his arms. "Yeah, I'm starting to get that feeling. You want to tell me why?" She hesitated, gripping the blanket tightly around her. Her body language screamed fear, but not of him. Of something else. Ethan sighed. "Listen, I don't know who you are or why those aliens were trying to kill you, but I do know they didn't want you alive, which makes me very interested in figuring out why." Soraya looked away, her jaw tightening. "I can't tell you." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You can't or you won't." Her fingers clenched into fists. "Both." A long silence stretched between them. Ethan studied her carefully, noting the way her body seemed to tremble slightly, like she was fighting an internal battle. She was hiding something. Something big. "Fine," he finally said. "You don't have to tell me, but at least tell me this. Are you a danger to me?" Soraya's eyes widened slightly. For a second, she looked sad. "No," she whispered. "Not to you." That wasn't exactly reassuring. Before he could push further, Nova's voice crackled through the speaker. "Incoming transmission detected. Scrambled source." Ethan stiffened. "Put it through." A garbled voice came through the comms, distorted but urgent. "Found you. Listen. Leave her. Too dangerous." Static overtook the signal before it cut out entirely. Ethan cursed under his breath. That wasn't random interference. Someone had tried to warn him. His eyes locked onto Soraya's. "Who the hell are you?" She opened her mouth but hesitated. That hesitation told him everything. Before she could answer, the bunker suddenly shook. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and the emergency lights flickered. Ethan's instincts kicked in immediately. He grabbed his rifle and activated the security feeds. Outside, in the darkness, red lights flickered. Drones. Hundreds of them. "Damn it," Ethan muttered. "They tracked us." Soraya paled. "It's them." Ethan didn't need to ask who. He already knew. A synthetic voice echoed through the bunker's speakers, cold and emotionless. "Soraya Unit 09, surrender immediately. Hostile human detected. Lethal force authorized." Ethan slowly turned to her. "Unit 09. Soraya flinched. "I can explain." The drones outside powered up their weapons. There was no more time for explanations. Ethan grabbed her arm. "You better do it while we run." She nodded, her violet eyes burning with something new. Determination. And maybe regret. The bunker shook again as the drones opened fire. The hunt had begun. Ethan's breath came fast as he sprinted down the underground tunnel, dragging Soraya behind him. The sound of metal clanking against the walls echoed through the passage as the drones above continued their relentless assault. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and the air vibrated with each explosion. His bunker wouldn't last much longer. "Keep moving," he barked, gripping Soraya's wrists tightly. She barely needed the encouragement. For someone who had been unconscious just hours ago, she was fast. Too fast. She moved like a trained soldier, her body instinctively knowing when to duck and weave. It wasn't just adrenaline. This was something else. The tunnel twisted ahead, leading deeper into the mountain's rock. Ethan had built this escape route years ago, in case things ever went south. Right now, it was their only way out. Nova's voice crackled in his earpiece. Warning. Enemy units have infiltrated the upper levels. Your exit route is compromised. Ethan cursed. Then give me a new one. A brief pause. Then Nova spoke again. Rerouting. Secondary tunnel leads to an abandoned mining shaft. Exit coordinates sent. He glanced at his wrist display. A new path lit up in green. Not ideal, but it would have to do. He turned sharply, pulling Soraya down a narrower tunnel. The air grew colder, the walls damp with moisture. The deeper they went, the darker it became. His helmet visor adjusted, enhancing the low light, but Soraya didn't seem to need it. Her glowing violet eyes pierced through the blackness, scanning their surroundings. You've done this before, Ethan noted, keeping his voice low. Soraya hesitated. I don't remember. Ethan didn't buy it. Bullshit, you move like a soldier. She didn't respond. Instead, she picked up speed, almost leading the way now. Ethan didn't know whether to be impressed or concerned. They finally reached the mining shaft. A rusted metal platform stretched over a deep chasm, leading to an old service elevator. Ethan reached for the controls, but before he could activate them, Soraya suddenly tensed. They're here, she whispered. Ethan raised his rifle. How do you know? Then he heard it. A low, metallic hum. He turned just as a shadowy figure dropped from the ceiling, landing silently on the platform in front of them. More followed, emerging from the darkness like ghosts. Their armor was sleek, black, and segmented, their eyes glowing an eerie red. They weren't just drones. They were soldiers. Ethan tightened his grip on his weapon. Friends of yours? Soraya didn't answer. One of the soldiers stepped forward. Unlike the rest, this one didn't wear a helmet. His face was sharp, angular, and too perfect, like it had been sculpted rather than born. His silver hair gleamed under the dim light, and his crimson eyes locked onto Soraya with something between curiosity and amusement. Unit 09, he said smoothly. You've been very difficult to track. Ethan's gut twisted. Unit 09. They weren't calling her by name. They were calling her by designation. Soraya's hands clenched at her sides. Rylos. Ethan glanced at her. You know him. Her expression darkened. He's my handler. That sent alarm bells ringing in Ethan's head. Handler. Rylos smirked. You didn't tell them. How rude. He looked at Ethan now, as if truly acknowledging him for the first time. I suppose I should thank you. Without your interference, she would have been disposed of properly. Ethan aimed his rifle at Rylos's head. You want to explain why you're hunting an unarmed girl? Rylos chuckled. Unarmed. Oh, human, you really have no idea what you've rescued, do you? Ethan glanced at Soraya. Start talking. Soraya was breathing hard, her shoulders rising and falling, but she wouldn't look at him. Rylos tilted his head. She hasn't told you, has she? His smirk widened. That's because she knows you'd turn on her the second you found out. Ethan's patience snapped. Enough games. What is she? Rylos's smile vanished. A weapon. Ethan felt his stomach drop. She was built, not born. Rylos continued. Designed to be the perfect infiltration unit. Stronger, faster, capable of learning and adapting faster than any organic soldier. The perfect killing machine. Ethan stared at Soraya. That's not true, is it? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Rylos sighed. See, even she won't deny it. She's dangerous, human. That's why we were going to terminate her. Ethan took a step back. His instincts screamed at him to run, to get as far away from her as possible. But something didn't add up. If she was a weapon, why had she been running? Why had she looked so afraid? You're lying, Ethan said, but there was doubt in his voice. Rylos smirked again. Am I? Soraya suddenly moved. but not toward Ethan. Toward Rylos. Her body blurred as she launched forward, her hand glowing with an unnatural energy. But before she could strike, Rylos moved just as fast. He caught her wrist midair, twisting it painfully. "Still clinging to your pathetic independence," he muttered. "You can't fight what you are." Soraya gritted her teeth, struggling, but he was stronger. Ethan made his choice. With a sharp movement, he raised his rifle and fired. The bullet hit Rylos in the shoulder, sending him stumbling back. It wasn't much, but it was enough for Soraya to break free. Ethan grabbed her arm. "Move." They sprinted toward the elevator. The soldiers opened fire, red energy bolts slicing through the air. Ethan ducked behind cover, returning fire while Soraya punched the elevator controls. Come on," she muttered. The elevator doors slid open. They dove inside just as another barrage of shots rang out. The last thing Ethan saw before the doors shut was Rylos standing there, completely unfazed, a cruel smile on his lips. Then the elevator dropped, plunging them into the depths below. The silence was deafening. The only sound was their heavy breathing. Ethan looked at Soraya, who was staring at the floor, her hands trembling. "You lied to me," he said quietly. Her shoulders tensed. "I didn't have a choice." Ethan clenched his fists. He had trusted her, defended her, and now he didn't know what to think. Finally, she looked up, her violet eyes filled with something he hadn't expected. Not guilt, not fear, but pain. "I don't want to be what they made me," she whispered. Ethan wanted to believe her, but doubt still lingered in his mind. And above them, far beyond the tunnels, Rylos was watching, waiting. The hunt wasn't over. Not even close. The elevator rattled as it descended deeper into the earth, the dim lights flickering overhead. Ethan stood against the metal wall, rifle still in his grip, his mind spinning with everything he had just heard. Across from him, Soraya sat on the floor, her knees pulled close to her chest, her glowing violet eyes staring at nothing. For the first time since he had met her, she looked small. A weapon, a machine, a creation, not a person. That's what Rylos had said. Ethan wanted to deny it, wanted to believe that Rylos was lying. But Soraya's silence, the way she had frozen when the truth came out, it spoke louder than any words could. He exhaled, gripping the rifle tighter. "You should start talking." Soraya blinked, as if coming out of a daze. She lifted her head, her expression unreadable. "What do you want me to say?" Ethan's jaw clenched. "How about the truth?" She hesitated. "I told you. I don't remember everything." Convenient. His voice was sharp. Her eyes flashed with something. Hurt, maybe anger, but she didn't lash out. Instead, she took a deep breath, as if preparing herself for something painful. "I wasn't born like you," she admitted. "I was made. Engineered by the Dominion to be useful." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "Useful how?" Soraya's fingers curled against the metal floor. "Infiltration. Assassination. They created me to be perfect. Stronger, faster, adaptable. The living weapon that could think for itself, but only within the limits they set." Ethan's stomach twisted. He had fought against the Dominion before, had seen what they were capable of. Ruthless, efficient, and technologically superior in every way. But this was something else. He gestured toward her. "So what makes you different from those metal freaks up there?" "From Rylos." Soraya's expression darkened. "I wasn't supposed to question orders. But something changed. Something inside me broke free." She looked down at her hands, flexing them like they were foreign to her. "I started thinking for myself. And when I did, I realized I didn't want to be what they made me." Ethan studied her carefully. She didn't look like she was lying, but he wasn't sure if that made things better or worse. "Why were they trying to kill you?" he asked. "Because I failed." Her voice was quiet. Ethan frowned. "Failed what?" She hesitated again. then finally met his gaze. A mission. I was sent to eliminate a high-ranking resistance leader. But when the time came, I didn't do it. I hesitated. She swallowed hard. They don't tolerate failure. Ethan let out a slow breath. He had seen Dominion soldiers before. Merciless, efficient, more machine than person. But Soraya, she wasn't like them. Not anymore. Before he could respond, Nova's voice crackled in his earpiece. Warning. Multiple heat signatures detected above. Enemy forces tracking descent. Ethan swore. Of course, Rylos wouldn't just let them escape. He glanced at Soraya. We don't have time for this. We need to move. She nodded, pushing herself up. The hesitation was gone now, replaced with the same sharp focus she had before. Whatever emotions she was feeling, she buried them deep. The elevator finally came to a halt with a loud clunk. The doors groaned as they slid open, revealing a dark underground cavern. Old mining equipment lay scattered across the area, rusted and broken. The air was damp, filled with the scent of earth and decay. Ethan moved first, sweeping his rifle around for any threats. Nova's sensors weren't picking up any immediate hostiles, but that wouldn't last long. Come on, he said. We need to. A sound cut him off. A deep, vibrating hum. Soraya stiffened. They're here. Ethan barely had time to react before something massive dropped from above. The ground trembled as a towering figure landed in front of them, its armor gleaming in the dim light. More followed, their eyes glowing red like dying embers. Rylos stepped forward, untouched by the fall. His expression was calm, almost amused. Did you really think you could run from me, Unit 09? Ethan immediately raised his rifle, but Rylos didn't even flinch. This doesn't concern you, human, he said smoothly. Step aside, and I'll make your death quick. Ethan smirked. I've heard that before. He pulled the trigger. The bullet never reached its target. Before his eyes, Rylos vanished. One moment he was standing there. The next he was gone, replaced by empty air. Ethan's instincts screamed at him to move, but it was too late. A sharp force slammed into his back, sending him crashing into the dirt. His rifle skidded out of reach. He rolled over just in time to see Rylos standing over him, a glowing blade forming in his hand. You're fast, Rylos admitted, but not fast enough. Before he could strike, Soraya lunged. She moved like a phantom, her body flickering with unnatural speed. Her fist connected with Rylos' side, sending him stumbling back. But he recovered instantly, his own movements just as fast. They clashed, their blows striking with deadly precision. The cavern echoed with the sound of metal on metal, each attack faster than the last. Ethan forced himself up, searching for his weapon. But before he could reach it, another soldier appeared, blocking his path. A metallic voice hissed, "Your interference ends here." Ethan barely dodged the first strike, twisting away as the soldier's blade cut through the air. He grabbed a rusted metal pipe from the ground, swinging it with all his strength. It connected with the soldier's head, but the impact barely staggered him. "Damn it," Ethan muttered. He ducked another strike, then kicked the soldier's leg out from under him. The moment of imbalance was enough. Ethan grabbed his fallen rifle, rolled onto his back, and fired point blank. The blast sent the soldier crashing to the ground, unmoving. He turned just in time to see Soraya still locked in combat with Rylos. But something was wrong. She was losing. Rylos had the advantage, his movements precise, his strikes relentless. Soraya was fast, but Rylos knew her. He anticipated her every move, countering before she could react. Then it happened. Rylos feinted left, forcing Soraya to shift her weight. In that instant, he twisted, bringing his blade down. The energy sword sliced through her side. Soraya let out a sharp gasp, her body jolting as the impact sent her crashing to the ground. Ethan's heart stopped. No. He fired. Again and again. But Rylos moved too fast, dodging every shot with inhuman precision. Then, with unnatural ease, he turned his back on Ethan and looked down at Soraya. "I told you," Rylos said softly. "You can't escape what you are." Soraya coughed, violet blood staining her lips. But even now, she glared up at him with defiance. "I am, not yours," she spat. Rylos sighed. Such a waste. He raised his blade for the final strike. Ethan didn't think. He moved. With a desperate roar, he threw himself forward, tackling Rylos with everything he had. The force sent them both tumbling back, slamming into the dirt. Ethan didn't stop. He struck, again and again, ignoring the pain as Rylos countered with brutal efficiency. But he wasn't trying to win. He was trying to buy time. "Soraya," he shouted. "Run." She hesitated. For just a second. Then she was gone. Rylos growled, shoving Ethan off him. He stood, eyes flashing with fury. "You're a fool," he hissed. Ethan wiped blood from his mouth and grinned. "Yeah, but I'm a stubborn one." Rylos' expression darkened. "She won't get far. And neither will you." As more soldiers appeared around them, Ethan knew one thing for sure. This fight was far from over. Ethan barely had time to react as more Dominion soldiers surrounded him, their glowing red eyes locking onto him like hungry predators. Rylos stood tall, his energy blade humming with deadly power. The air was thick with the tension of the fight that was about to explode. Ethan was bleeding, bruised, and outnumbered. He was just one human against an army of enhanced warriors. But he had never backed down before. With a sharp breath, he tightened his grip on his rifle and fired at the closest soldier. The plasma round struck its target in the chest, sending sparks flying as the Dominion warrior staggered back. But before Ethan could get off another shot, another soldier lunged at him. Ethan barely dodged in time, rolling across the rough cavern floor as a plasma blade slashed through the air where he had been. He came up on one knee, his rifle already aimed. A burst of gunfire echoed through the cavern, taking down another enemy. But they kept coming. Rylos moved toward him with terrifying speed. Ethan barely managed to block the first strike with his rifle, but the impact sent a violent shockwave up his arms. His weapon shattered, the metal melting under the sheer power of Rylos' blade. Ethan stumbled back, his heart pounding. "You're persistent," Rylos said, tilting his head as if examining him. "But you're only human. Do you really think you can stand against us?" Ethan clenched his fists, breathing hard. "I don't need to win. I just need to buy time." Rylos raised an eyebrow, then smirked. "For what?" "The girl is wounded and weak. There's nowhere left for you to." Ethan's mind raced. He knew Soraya had escaped deeper into the cavern, but for how long? They had no real way out, and with Rylos and his soldiers blocking the only exit, things looked grim. Then, a loud explosion rocked the cavern. The ceiling cracked, and large chunks of rock tumbled down. Dust and smoke filled the air as part of the cavern caved in. The Dominion soldiers were momentarily distracted, their systems adjusting to the sudden environmental shift. Ethan took the chance. He grabbed a fallen plasma rifle from one of the Dominion soldiers and fired wildly, forcing them to scatter. Then he bolted toward the deeper tunnels. He ran as fast as his body allowed, pain screaming in his muscles. The sound of footsteps echoed behind him. Rylos was following. Ethan pushed forward, his lungs burning. He turned a sharp corner, nearly crashing into Soraya. She was leaning against the wall, her hand pressed against her bleeding side. Despite the pain, her eyes sharpened when she saw him. "You're alive," she said, breathless. "Barely," he muttered. "But we're not done yet." Soraya's gaze flicked to the tunnel behind him, her expression darkening. "He's coming." Ethan nodded. "Then we make our stand here." Soraya hesitated. "I don't want you to die for me." Ethan gave a short laugh. "I'm not dying. Not today." Before she could respond, Rylos emerged from the tunnel, his blade glowing in the dim light. The Dominion soldiers were close behind, their movements precise and disciplined. Ethan exhaled slowly. This was it. Soraya pushed off the wall, forcing herself to stand tall. Despite the pain, despite everything, she still had the fire in her eyes. "You're not taking me back," she said, her voice steady. Rylos tilted his head. "You were never meant to be free, Soraya. You were created to serve." Soraya's expression hardened. "Then I reject my creators." She lunged. Faster than Ethan had ever seen her move, she launched herself at Rylos, their blades colliding in a blinding clash of light. Sparks flew as they fought, their movements a blur of speed and precision. Ethan didn't hesitate. He raised his stolen rifle and fired at the incoming soldiers. The Dominion warriors advanced with cold efficiency, dodging and deflecting his shots. He had to keep them away from Soraya, had to hold the line. A soldier charged at him, plasma blade raised. Ethan ducked, twisting to the side before slamming the butt of his rifle into the soldier's helmet. The impact knocked the enemy back, but another took his place immediately. It was a brutal, desperate battle. Soraya fought like a storm, her movements unpredictable and deadly. But Rylos was stronger. He countered her every strike, forcing her back with each clash. "You can't defeat me," Rylos said, his tone almost disappointed. "You are incomplete, a broken weapon." Soraya gritted her teeth. "I am not a weapon." With a sudden burst of speed, she shifted her stance, twisting under Rylos's guard. Her blade flashed, cutting deep into his side. Rylos stumbled, violet energy sparking from the wound. It wasn't fatal, but it was enough. Soraya didn't stop. She pressed forward, striking again and again, forcing Rylos back. For the first time, he looked surprised. Ethan saw his chance. With the last of his strength, he grabbed a fallen explosive charge from the ground, arming it with a flick of his wrist. "Soraya, Movi." Without hesitation, she leaped back as Ethan hurled the charge directly at Rylos. The explosion rocked the tunnel, consuming Rylos in fire and debris. The force sent Ethan and Soraya tumbling back. Rocks collapsed around them, sealing the tunnel. Dust filled the air, making it hard to breathe. Ethan coughed, forcing himself to sit up. His body ached, but he was alive. Soraya groaned, pushing herself up beside him. Is he dead?" Ethan stared at the burning wreckage, the collapsed tunnel blocking any sign of Rylos. He exhaled. "I hope so." Silence filled the air, broken only by the distant sound of crumbling rock. They had won. Soraya looked at him, something unreadable in her expression. "You didn't have to do that." Ethan shrugged, offering a tired grin. "Yeah, well, I guess I'm bad at leaving people behind." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then, slowly, she smiled. It was small, but real. For the first time, Soraya wasn't running. Ethan sat against the jagged rocks, his body aching from the brutal fight. The air was thick with dust, and the distant fires flickered against the cave walls. His breathing was heavy, his chest rising and falling as he tried to steady himself. Every part of him screamed in exhaustion, but he was alive. And so was Soraya. She was beside him, her silver hair matted with dirt and blood. Her glowing eyes had lost some of their usual sharpness, but they were still filled with something he hadn't seen before. Relief. For the first time since he had met her, she wasn't running. She wasn't afraid. She was free. Ethan let out a tired chuckle. Well, that was one hell of a fight. Soraya turned her head slightly, watching him with a quiet intensity. "You didn't have to do it." He smirked, wiping the blood from his lip. "You keep saying that like it would have changed anything." She was silent for a moment, then exhaled softly. "You could have died." "Yeah, but I didn't." He shifted, feeling the soreness in his muscles. "And even if I did, I think it would have been worth it." Soraya lowered her gaze. She had spent her whole life being hunted, being told she was nothing but a tool, a weapon to be used. No one had ever fought for her before. No one had ever chosen her. Ethan wasn't like the others. The weight of everything settled over them. They had won, but it didn't feel like a victory. The cost had been too high. The fallen Dominion soldiers lay motionless across the cavern, their lifeless bodies scattered among the rubble. Rylos was gone, buried beneath the collapsed tunnel. But even in death, Ethan knew men like him never truly disappeared. Someone else would take his place. The Dominion wouldn't stop hunting Soraya just because Rylos was dead. Ethan sighed. We can't stay here. Soraya nodded, pushing herself up despite the pain. She swayed slightly, and Ethan instinctively reached out, steadying her. She tensed at first, unused to the kindness, but then allowed it. He glanced toward the far side of the cavern. There was another tunnel, one that led deeper underground. They didn't know where it went, but anywhere was better than here. You good to walk? He asked. Soraya nodded. I'll manage. Together, they moved forward, stepping over the debris and bodies. The silence was deafening, the echoes of the battle still lingering in the air. Every step was a reminder of what they had lost, but also of what they had survived. As they entered the tunnel, the light from the fires behind them slowly faded, leaving only darkness ahead. Ethan glanced at Soraya. Do you trust me? She hesitated for only a second before nodding. Yes. That single word meant more than anything else. The path ahead was uncertain, the dangers far from over. But for the first time in a long time, neither of them were alone. And that was enough.